I blurted out. Normally I sat quietly or stood quietly and let the guys from the networks ask all the questions, and I just listened and took notes, and mostly it was bullshit and poppycock to try to ingratiate themselves with their networks and make it look like, yeah, they're on the case and Michael's guilty, and so I just sit and listen to this poppycock. But this one day, I blurted out, shouldn't Tom Sneddon be indicted for his felony of evidence tampering? And Diane Dimond was standing right next to me, and her head spun at me so fast, 90 degrees, that phlegm and spit from her mouth hit me in the face and the neck as she was yelling at me, well, Sneddon's not on trial, Michael's on trial. And she went on and on saying something very angry, and I don't recall everything she said, and I wiped my face off, and after that I made a point not to be standing next to Diane Dimond, and I realized at that point she wasn't just an angry reporter. This woman was mentally off balance. She was delusional. She had a illness, and she then, there was a guy named B.J. Hickman who was a 16, 17-year-old fan who would travel from many states away to be at this trial. But he was a Jackson fan, and he would yell so loud you could hear him inside the hallways of the courthouse, and he had a restraining order put against him by Diane Dimond, and that restraining order was because he would yell, Michael is innocent, Michael is innocent, and you could hear him above all the other fans. He had quite a set of lungs. And Diane Dimond went to court and said, I feel threatened by this guy, B.J. Hickman, so I want a restraining order. And the judge gave it to him, so he had to shut his mouth and stay away whenever Diane Dimond was in sight. And at the end, he sued her and a company she worked for violation of his First Amendment rights. It didn't go to trial. They settled out of court, but as a result, whoever it was Diane Dimond was reporting for back east fired her, and she lost her job eventually, shortly after the Jackson trial. And I believe someone's paying her under the table. I'm not sure she's sane or competent. I got all her mental faculties that she could sit down and have a dialogue with me, even if I could get her to that place in my studio to sit down and put the mic on and do a live show with me. I don't think she's mentally competent, just from my observations of her. And she became quite hated among the Jackson fans. But there were other people that were reporting lies, and I would hear them during these breaks, and it just so offended me when someone would get on their private cell phone, a credentialed reporter of many years would get on their private cell phone and talk to their husband or their spouse and say, you know what, this is all a crap of lies against Michael. And then their business cell phone would ring from New York City or Philadelphia or wherever they were from. And they'd say, oh, I got to go. I got to answer the network. And they'd hang up on their spouse, and they'd say, oh, yeah, I'm going to give you a report. Say this. Michael was accused today of this, and Michael was accused of that, and it really looks bad for Michael, blah, 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 blah.
The same question. This is a question that many people in general public will want to know. Why did Michael Jackson attempt to prosecute Sneddon and Zonin after he was acquitted? Why did he try and push charges then against both the prosecutors and Jan advisor?
Well, I wondered the exact same thing. The question is, why didn't Michael Jackson go after them for malicious prosecution and for the crimes they committed in the trial? Certainly, I think that the answer is simple. Number one, Michael, I think, was drugged down on the day of the verdict. He was so in shock, so petrified. He'd been waiting for days and over a week for the jury to come back for a verdict. So people were wondering, is he going to be found guilty of something? So he was kind of drugged down. He was in shock. He traveled around the world. But I think there was a deep-rooted religious value given to Michael by Catherine to not sue, they slap you, turn the other cheek. Although Michael did bring some lawsuits against some perjurers and liars that had robbed him of things from Neverland, and they caught these people. Yeah, he did bring some lawsuits, but I think you just about have to twist Michael's arm and bite him and pinch him to make him do that. He didn't want to do it. So I think he had a religious value against it, but also I think he was in shock. And the third reason I think he didn't do it is he knew it would be a very long and expensive, because this county would have spent their last $1 million to defend their own prosecutors. They would have spent everything they didn't even have and taxed the hell out of the people of the county, created new taxes to pay for it. And in fact, they are doing that right now. They're trying to add on a new tax because the county never really recovered from the Michael Jackson cost of that trial.
Yes.
So I think Michael knew it would be expensive, and Michael was financially weak at that point. And maybe he would have, had he lived, he might have. But I think he knew he was smart enough. Michael was not a fool. He might have kept a childlike innocence, but I think he was also smart. And he knew he had to have the money to carry out a Michael Jackson trial against the prosecutors. He knew that. And so that's the other reason I think he didn't do it.
And the third question is, you mentioned how in an interview with the professor from Texas, you mentioned that there were 5 anti-Michael Jackson books that went to the shredders as soon as he was acquitted. I was wondering if you can give us any detail or background on those books that were never published.
Yeah, the first and foremost was the eldest female juror. I forget her name, but I have her on video. I can't remember her name. Say it again.
Her name was Eleanor Cook, and she and
right. That's it. Eleanor Cook. She had a book deal, and she confessed to me when I went to her house to interview her. I don't remember how many months after the trial, but she confessed to me in our discussions that, yes, she had made a book deal. She had talked to this guy out of Hollywood, and her name was going to be listed as the author, but they were pretty much going to write the book for her, and she was just going to give them a few little details and stuff that happened in the jury room that no one else would know, and that book was going to come out and find Michael Jackson guilty. And she also told me, which I didn't know until I went to her house, but she had worked for a judge. She's a retired judge's clerk and gets her pension from the county from working from a judge. And she also told me she thought Sneddon and Zonin and Auchincloss did a sloppy, terrible job of prosecuting Michael. She thought it was just one of the sloppiest, lousy jobs she had ever seen. And apparently she had witnessed quite a few trials. So she was angry at Sneddon. And when I got Gary Dunlap to run for district attorney, she actually came out and endorsed Gary Dunlap because she wanted Dunlap to humiliate Sneddon. She was angry with Sneddon for doing such a lousy job. But she also told me that she got on the jury by hiding the fact she didn't like Michael, and she downplayed that part, and she wanted to find Michael guilty because she didn't like some of his stage routines, and she didn't like him grabbing his crotch. She told me this off the record when I went to her house. And so she went in there with a guilty plea in mind, and they're not supposed to do that. When they tell the judge, yeah, I can be unbiased, they're supposed to be sincere, but she basically admitted to me in her own words that she went in to find him guilty. But after seeing the terrible evidence, she was angry, and for a while I was trying to reason with her and saying, well, the evidence was all concocted. It was all fake. It was all phony. How could Sneddon how could he make a silk purse out of a cow's ear? You know, the evidence was no good. But she just, you know, she had this mindset that Michael probably did something to some kid someplace sometime, so we ought to find him guilty this time. And she admitted, you know, in the end, she was forced to just acquit Michael because the evidence was so bad. And to me, that was a tremendous thing to get out of her, to hear that from her own lips. And she didn't want to talk to me about that particularly. And I had to kind of twist it out. And she said, are you taping? Tape part of that conversation, but I've never published it because she promised to come on a live show, which we have never done. She promised to come back